Hello, everybody. You are back with the Rugby Bunker podcast. I'm Ben Coles. He's Charlie Morgan. Hi, Charlie.
Hello, pal. How are you?
I'm okay, mate. I'm okay. I feel like winter has descended upon us, and I'm not thrilled. Yeah, I'm not elated. I'm not buzzing about that, but we'll adapt.
Adapt, overcome. Chickenpox have hit our house with poor little Max down, but we are powering through.
Not that I'm laughing at Max's situation. I just wasn't expecting chickenpox to hit our house just to come out of your mouth like that. I mean, yeah, that's not a barrel of laughs.
It's not, mate. But adapt, overcome, all of those things.
How will chickenpox affect R360? That is the SEO title for this episode. That's what I'll be putting out there into the socials, into the ether. Well, listen, Charlie, let's get into a few little headlines I think that we should discuss. So firstly, and I'm absolutely stitching you up here because I've just realised it's not on the rundown. George Ford this morning signed a new contract with Sale Sharks. I feel like we should speak about that. Now, if I dig up the press release, it's always nice when clubs actually include how long these contracts are for, because it sort of takes away a bit of the hard work that we have to do behind the scenes, chatting to people to work out how long they're there for. So yeah, Ford, who is 32, signed a 3-year contract, which feels very interesting because it kind of tees him up for a coaching stint potentially when he gets to 35. What do you reckon?
Well, he was asked that. I was on his media call yesterday, which was as ever just fantastic. Just he speaks so clearly, so eloquently about a range of things. And it was the second thing I think he was asked was about whether he would be going into coaching and whether that was a fait accompli. And he said, no. He said, look, in his head, he's still going to be playing then. And yeah, you're right. That was the 3 years is what I first thought. So that's beyond the World Cup. That ends the Lions summer, right? 2029, I think. Because you always add on one first, so four from now, and he's the second consecutive England 10 after Finn Smith the week previously to say I was aware of R360 as an option. Ford just mentioned that his agent had sort of mentioned it to him, mentioned that there'd been an approach that way. He's far too he's not going to sort of bring friction where he doesn't have to. And he just said, yeah, the thing for me was always England. He volunteered that, as Finn Smith, it looked like Finn Smith did. Finn Smith's targeting 2027. George Ford was quite forceful on saying, I am targeting being part of a winning England side. And there was a nice line later on when he said it was one thing representing England, but when you've been around it for a while, you realise that actually winning with England is better than absolutely anything else. He's done a lot of that and he wants to do a lot more of that, clearly.
Yeah, got his 100th cap in the summer. His brother Joe is now Sale's attack coach, and I like that from him, that he still thinks he'll be going at 35. I mean, actually, if a 10 was going to follow the Jimmy Gopperth route and be playing kind of top flight until they're 40, George would probably be one of the players I'd consider. He's going to be a coach at some point, surely. Like there's no way that he doesn't end up in a senior coaching role at club or international level, with the way that he, not to dumb us down, Charlie, but the way that he explains stuff to us in media sessions or press conferences when you ask him for a bit of detail about why a team attacked in a certain way or why they took this tactical approach. He's so good at that. He's so good at conveying tactics and messages to people that, yeah, if he doesn't end up as a coach, I will be staggered.
He already is one, as you've touched on there. And if not just for the media, it's really funny on those calls because he will answer anything really, really well. And there was just one point where I said, how about telling me about a few tactical trends over the next kind of, because if he's so passionate about being part of a winning England side, I was sort of saying, how are England gonna win? What are they going to have to be good at? And he was just so sharp for about 90 seconds talking about how the game now is being in structure first of all, and then getting out of structure, and how important that being able to attack in broken field is. And actually, I think I'm right in saying that he actually said, and the exciting thing is that you can get better at that in training, and that's something that you can actually train. And I just thought, wow, he's always thought like a coach and spoken like a coach. And there's no surprise because his father's one. Somebody else who always has, obviously, Owen Farrell would have been one of those fathers a coach. Harry Mallender, if you remember ever speaking to him, he's had that same authority and spoke like that because obviously Father Jim coach as well. So been around it his whole life. And yeah, that is absolutely it's a transition you can see him making, but he's got a lot more he wants to achieve first, not least informing and educating journalists.
And then, hey, look, maybe he does start in the autumn. Maybe it's not Finn Smith. Maybe it's not Marcus Smith. We don't know. I spoke about this with Harry Latham Coyle. I was about to call him Harry Randall. Spoke about it with Harry Latham Coyle from The Independent on Tuesday's episode of the Rugby Bunker. Like, there's still a decent chance that Ford is the starter. So that's Ford staying on at Sale and kind of spurning.
Would genuinely,
go on.
Would genuinely be interested in who Harry Randall wants to start at 10 for England.
Yeah. What in terms of most well suited, he and Marcus Smith together would be a lot of fun. But would Steve ever do it? First question next week when we have our brief access at Penny Hill Park, maybe. So from George Ford spurning R360 to a bit of news out of Australia this morning from the NRL. Last week to catch up, there was the joint statement from numerous unions and rugby unions saying that players who joined R360 would be ineligible to play Test rugby, which is obviously a bit of a hammer blow to R360's hopes because they want to attract the best players and have them also playing Test rugby. But if players have to make a choice, things get a bit messy. And now the Australian Rugby League governing body has said that any kind of NRL, any players who join R360 would be banned from playing in the NRL for 10 years, which is essentially your career. So quite a firm and bold statement from the NRL governing body, wouldn't you say, Charlie?
Yeah, and they're banning agents as well, right? Who are involved in negotiating those deals. The NRL has seemed like such a big player in all of this because there was that steady bleed of stories coming out around the Lions tour when coincidentally Mike Tindall was in Australia and I understand a few of the R360 kind of senior representatives were there as well. It seemed like they were sort of doing the rounds, chatting to, if not our NRL players, then certainly their representatives. So yeah, it does feel like a significant development. But as I said last week, again, to play devil's advocate, I don't think this level of action, because it's quite drastic, is happening if it's not a viable threat. As I think I sort of hinted at this last time. There's part of me that thinks, stop, it's already dead. You're absolutely hammering this. I've seen that there are stories about referees being banned. That obviously the union statement in rugby union, but then also that's not happening if it's not somehow generating impetus. I'm just curious to see sort of what comes out next. And as I said, what comes out when R360 actually do get on the front foot, if they do at all.
Yeah, I'll flash up this quote on the screen from the R360 co-chief executive Mark Spores, where he basically just talks about, R360 is all about empowering players. It's all about, we remain on plan, look forward to sharing and discussing the detail in the coming months. Like there's like you say, there's no backing down. There's no kind of putting the hands up and accepting it's not going to work. But there is certainly no subtlety with the way that all of these governing bodies are now coming out and saying, look, this is how we feel about it. And this is the warning to players as well, which is interesting. Right. From that, I want to jump to another little news item, only because we spoke about R360 a lot last week. Let's take it back to the issues that, also really matter. Crooked feeds and scrums. Charlie, as an honest scrum half, you would have never, ever have put in a crooked feed to a scrum, would you?
Can I tell a story about this? So
yes,
there was a referee. I remember a referee who was refereeing around community level in London. And I really hope he still is. Kind of old boy. Every game I ever had him for, he would do me or the opposing scrum half for feeding on the first scrum. It didn't matter how straight the feed was. And once I remember being on the bench, and I think it was I can't remember. There was a big hill, and I'm not joking. This is no word of a lie. I could see a pitch sort of in the distance of this club. I'm really annoyed I can't remember. I'll come back next week and I'll remember the name of the club, but could see a pitch in the distance. Same guy was refereeing, and it was the first scrum of the game. And I turned to the replacement who's next to me and said, "Watch this. This first scrum, it's going to be done for feeding, whatever happens." And it was. So, do you know what? It's just one of those things. It's a very elite problem. It's like caterpillar rucks. You don't see it. The further you go down the levels, the less common it becomes. Because referees don't necessarily have the spectacle to worry about as much. So they're more kind of likely to go by the book. And it's just really interesting. So Raynal in this news story says, look, we had the teams on board at the start, and we said we were going to ping cricket feeds, and we said at the start, as long as you don't sort of come back to us and you don't say, why are you doing this? This is ruining us. And he said, look, we started pinging it, and sure enough, the teams are not happy and they're complaining. And that's just really interesting to see sort of where it goes from here, I guess. But it sounds like, Raynal sort of seems to be, from people that have sort of chatted to him away from the game, a pretty sort of forthright's maybe the wrong word, but certainly sort of a persistent kind of character. And that's great. If this is the way forward, I think it's really important for rugby union to preserve the scrum as a point of difference, because in other ways it has been seen to be an eyesore, and in other ways they have clearly been attempts. The goal line dropout law, for instance, there have been moves to sort of make fewer scrums happen in a game. So when they do happen, it's pretty cool that it will be a fair contest.
Yeah, just for context, so that's Matthew Raynal, who was the former Test referee who retired last year, and he's now basically head of the referees for the LNR, who run the top 14 in France. And yet, I quite do enjoy the honesty of his comments. He also had another line where they were talking about teams at the Mall and sort of infringing there, where he said that, like some teams like Toulouse and La Rochelle, they've admitted to swinging around the side of the malls. And it was the way that quote comes across as like such a disappointed parent, but also in my brain brings out that just amazing image of Romain Poit refereeing and just with the hands up going, confession, I've made a mistake. So I've thoroughly enjoyed this open discussion that they're having over in France. And I know that cricket scrum feeds are a bane of a lot of older viewers of the game who remember when scrums were sort of perfectly operated. And so I'm sure this news will be well received. Charlie, before we dig into our like big topic of the day, which is where we are going to be ranking the PREM scrum-halves after we did the top 10 fly-halves last week, I thought we'd just touch on a few little things we want to see this weekend in round 4. Round 4? Yeah.
Round 4.
Season's absolutely flying by at a rapid pace. So I will start. Gloucester Bristol on Friday night is the battle of the infirmaries, really, isn't it? Like there's so many injured players on both teams. Like, this Bristol backline situation is just getting ridiculous. So they finished with 3 scrum halves on the field in their win over Exeter last week. It doesn't sound like things are getting much better. I think Pat Lam said during his media session that they've also got 2 more, is it Carrington and Bates, who have got head knocks, and then Tom Jordan is essentially expected to be banned for a few weeks. So they are essentially running out of backs. Gloucester have had an interesting start to the season where they've not been like utterly atrocious for all 3 of their games, but they've just had large patches where they've been terrible. Now you've got injury ravaged Bristol going to Gloucester on Friday night. Gloucester surely have got to capitalise on this, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. We said last time, didn't we, that they'd put together, Gloucester has put together well over 80 minutes of decent stuff. It was just that they'd split that. Bath are gonna make teams look pretty poor, or just helpless, I think, but rather than poor, because they've just got so many dimensions now as a team. And yeah, for that first half of the West Country derby, that certainly looked that way. But you're right, huge opportunity. There's a few. So if I sort of nip into the one I'm kind of intrigued by, I'm at Saracen Sale, but Leicester hosting Bath, more so because I think Leicester they're sort of staring down the barrel. Not quite yet, but it's certainly becoming a more realistic possibility that they get to the autumn with 1-4 with 4 losses, because but the sort of the lifeline, or what they'll sort of be thinking is that they've got 2 games now, Bath and then Sale, where they're at home. Winning one of them feels very important, but absolutely will not be easy at all. They hung in really well with Saints, and I think if Jack Van Poortvliet hadn't gone off with 20 or so to go, I think they would have got even closer than they did, and they still got a losing bonus point despite being behind 5-2 on the try count. So there have been, Jeff Parling said it really well actually himself, that look, it's all well and good. The togetherness is there, the sort of determination, even how they're following game plans is pretty tidy. They just need that little bit more now, and that needs to be accuracy. That needs to be being able to execute when the pressure's high.
Yeah, that would be some statement if they can knock them off there and get the win. Still no closer to working out who the starting 10 is long term, because Billy Searle did well when Bailey dropped out against Quins, didn't he? And he got the start last week, and then you had O'Connor and Bailey on the bench. So we're still figuring out.
They came on as a little 10-12, which would be interesting. Yeah. As we record this on Wednesday afternoon, it's kind of very interesting the way they go.
Speaking of Wallabies making debuts for new clubs in the Prem, could get a bit of Len Ikitau and Henry Slade for Exeter Quins, which is spicy. I saw that Exeter had put out a little hype video just about Wednesday lunchtime as we're recording of Slade sort of explaining to Ikitau Exeter's attacking shape on the pitch and sort of getting used to one another. I mean, on paper, it's a lovely, exciting combination. And I know Tom Hooper is there and in full training now as well. If you get both of those guys making their debuts, it might be off the bench, but in a game against Quins, which is really intriguing, because if Quins go to Sandy Park and back up that win over Saracens, that sort of changes how I feel maybe a little bit about Harlequins in terms of how good they could become and how tough to beat they could become.
Makes me feel worse about predicting them 9th for sure.
You weren't alone.
And back that up. No, however, no, I would certainly would feel worse about that if they back that up, because they always. I don't want to dampen too much enthusiasm here, but sort of having. I watched it. Didn't watch Harlequin Saracens live. I watched it back a little bit later, having read a lot of the reports. I wasn't as high on that as a collective performance, I don't think, as most. I thought they controlled the air really, really well. I thought they went after Saracens' weakness, which was those young wingers, found a lot of space in the backfield. Marcus Smith's restraint was really good. We spoke about Finn Russell's restraint and how that's kind of propelled him to greater heights. I think that's the template for Marcus, is picking his moments, and he did that really, really well. I thought they could have won. They could have beaten Saracens by more, but their problem has been backing up those over the last few seasons has been consistency. So yeah, it's a really interesting test for them for sure.
And on the flip of that, Exeter had that crazy draw at Saints. They comfortably beat Newcastle. They were actually pretty unlucky not to win at Bristol with those 2 disallowed tries, and very feasibly could have won that. Probably should have won that, actually, considering that Bristol were without Tom Jordan after his red card and down to 14 for a good chunk of that game. So, but if they win this and they start turning Sandy Park into a tough place to go, I think before the start of the season we would have circled home games against Newcastle, home games against Harlequins for Exeter, and said, well, you have to win those if you're going to do something. If you add in the Hooper and Ikitau, good vibes that comes with that. That's also very interesting. I think that's most of the games covered. Northampton are at Newcastle on Friday night. It's hard to see Northampton not winning that, I think, based on the way that Newcastle seem to have gone backwards over the last 2 weeks.
That's very fair.
Lovely. That's the Prem games this weekend. Stuff we're looking forward to. Charlie, this feels like an unfair advantage, but we're going to have a little break now, and then you, as a former scrum half, are going to rank the top 10 Prem scrum-halves, and I'll chip in as well. Right, Charlie. Did the fly halves last week. It's our top 10 Prem scrum-halves this week. I mean, this was interesting. I feel like we were in a similar-ish thoughts on the top 5, but not quite in sync, which is always good. A shout out to Toby Bly, I'm going to say, is how you say that, on YouTube in the comment section, who said maybe the 9's next last week. And listen, Toby, We are nothing if not receptive to comments and suggestions. As Charlie said, we will rank anything, and I'm excited to see where he's going to take that in future episodes. But
I had an offline request from a friend of the pod, therefore Fabian Taylor, who asked about media food. If you keep asking about that, we will do it. Shout out to the loaded fries at Northampton Saints. Excellent.
Shout out to some chips. I like it. Look, there's no way we won't do media food at some point. I like that we're getting so many requests for it. But for this week, Charlie, it's the scrum halves. So if I draw up our lovely table of our top 10, I think just as a general comment, the top tier group are pretty clear, right? And then you do sort of get outside of that top tier group, a bit like we had with the 10s, and you're suddenly thinking, this is a bit different, which is probably why we've got so much variation. So why don't you go through your 10 to 6 first, and then I'll do mine.
Yeah, and with scrum halves, it's quite hard to untie them, I think, from the success of a team, and them also from the suitability of a team. So a scrum half that isn't necessarily in sync with how their team is playing tactically, or the game model, to use the phrase that coaches use, they can look pretty out of order pretty quickly, I would have thought. And then the other thing, I guess the other point I'd like to make before we start, is that I think ranking somebody 10th certainly doesn't mean you're not impressed or you don't respect their sort of credentials as a player, because there are guys sort of low in my top 10 who I still absolutely rate. It's just that they're, I guess, the front line. There's one club in my top 10 who contribute to, and same as yours, and that just goes to show that these guys are very important as far as what a team does. So my 10 to 6, I've got Simon Benitez Cruz at 10, Ivan Van Zale at 9, Will Porter 8, Gus Waugh 7, Kieran Marmion 6. I think Cruz is going to be a fantastic signing for Red Bulls. I think in that cameo he made, even with things going from bad to worse, really, against Sale, he made a fantastic interception, didn't he, from a Sale wraparound play. Luke McGrath, the long-time Leinster Nines, made a career out of making those interventions, and they're fantastic. So really promising there. Was quite sparky around the breakdown, as we would have expected, given how he goes for the Pumas. So just really excited about his potential. He's just reasonably low, because I haven't seen a lot of him clearly in the Premier, because he's just rocked up. But I think he's going to prove a really interesting signing. Your 10 is very interesting. I would have had your number 10 higher again if I'd seen more of it.
Yeah, so at 10 I've got Rafi Quirk. If I do my 10-6, sorry. So at 10 I've got Rafi Quirk. I've got Stephen Varney at 9. I've got Kieran Marmion at 8. I've got Will Porter at 7 and Gus Waugh at 6. So I like how we've sort of got Marmion, Porter and Waugh all in that sort of chunk, but they're not, but they're all kind of shuffled around. Rafi Quirk, I'm not ready to give up on yet, because he made his comeback, I think, against Newcastle this season. He had half an hour off the bench last Friday. He's just had such a horrible run of injuries, and I just know that there's a very, very good player there. What's interesting now is that you have this tandem of him and Gus Waugh at Sale, where I'll be fascinated to know, once Quirk is like fully up and running and he seems fully fit and he's shaken off everything, who actually gets the preferential nod there, because Gus Waugh is a very good, very industrious, incredibly yappy scrum half by all accounts, from what we've seen of him, like winding up opponents or kind of getting in the heads of teams, which is a trait that I adore in a scrum half. It's a 9 who kind of really winds up opponents. Said I've got an interesting decision there, but yeah, I just didn't want to forget about Rafi Quirk, and I actually think that if I talk about Exeter again, I just think Varney is kind of sneaky good business for them at a position where they sort of had a lot of similar options for a few years with Stu Townsend there, and now they've gone in another direction. I think Varney does bring in a lot of test quality. We've seen it for Italy, and I like the way he started. I was particularly taken with him setting up Paul Brown-Bampo for a try against Northampton with a lovely little grubber behind. I just think there's more to his game than people realise. I mean, I would guess, Charlie, that Kieran Marmion would have made our list anyway. But obviously his role now is just so much more important this season, isn't it? Now that that Harry Randall is out until I think it's the new year with that hamstring. If you view Marmion as a backup, which I guess he technically is, you're not getting much higher quality than that, are you, from a player in that kind of position?
No, I think that looked like an excellent signing as soon as it was made from Bristol, two, three seasons ago now. Quite interesting fact on Marmion. He would now technically qualify to play for England, but I'm not sure he qualifies as an EQP under the sort of the league regulations, because there's a little clause in that which some clubs are frustrated by, which is that if a player sort of re-qualifies for England, I think Sammy Arnold is another one up at Newcastle, England have to show an interest in them for them to count as EQP again, which is very interesting. I think I'm right in saying that was certainly the case sort of last season. Yeah, that's a very, very kind of an interesting wrinkle as far as how those clubs have to sort of use up their slots. If I go back to mine, Ivan Van Zyl at 9, maybe consistency of kicking. He has to kick a lot through 9 just because of how Saracens play, and I just don't feel like that's his natural game somehow. I think he's sort of better kind of distributing and sort of getting pace on the ball. Very interesting to see how Saracens kind of use the 9s below him. Charlie Bracken, they're clearly keen on seeing more of, and England sort of had a look at him in a squad, didn't they, recently? Just to go back to your number 10, Rafi Quirk, you're saying you're not ready to give up on him. I don't think England are either. Heading to my number 8, you're right. I'm just looking at it now, that bracket of 8, 7, 6. We've all got Marmion, War and Porter in there. Really like Porter, really tidy player. He can continue to go from strength to strength at Harlequins now with Danny Kerr gone and with Stu Townsend there sort of dovetailing with him. It was very important in that Saracens win. Just it seems a very, very impressive character as well, which is obviously important. And he's been in and around the England A stuff, playing a couple of times at least, I think, for them. I think, yeah, you're right. Gus War, very tidy. Cool to see him recognised with Scotland. We sort of have had a little bit of an inkling that Sale are looking to recruit at 9. And I think I'm fairly sure in thinking that they spoke to Alex Mitchell before Alex Mitchell re-signed just this week at Saints. So all very interesting stuff if we now head into the top 5.
That's a spicy little tidbit of gossip there, which I quite like hearing. Yeah, I could see him. If you had Mitchell forward at Sale, that would have been nice. Yeah, you're right on Quirk. I forgot that he featured in that A game for England before they went off on tour, so he's very much in their thoughts. And yes, it's a cool season for Will Porter just because Danny Kerr's not there anymore. It's almost like Harlequins prepared for this, didn't they? Like long-term plans, like Porter would eventually take over properly. You saw it a lot last season. Yeah, look, they're all very good players, and Zeal was very close to making my top 10. I know that Mark McCall is just a huge fan of how he runs that team. He ended up just missing out. But listen, top 5 is, I think the top 5 do kind of separate themselves from the bottom 5. And maybe that is just because you've got players in there who England have sort of looked at pretty seriously over the last few years, and who've all got good who've all got test experience, I guess, recently as well for England, apart from one of them. So I'm happy to say that at 5, 4 and 3, we have the same players. So we've got Harry Randall at 5, Jack Van Portfleet at 4, and Thomas Williams at 3. So why don't we start with Harry Randall, Charlie? Why did you feel that he just didn't quite have the edge over Van Portfleet, for example, who's slightly above him?
Good question. Not really sure.
Thanks,
I think this is the suitability to the team he's at, right? So he does not have to box kick for Bristol Bears more than there have been plenty of games where he hasn't had to box kick at all. I think he would probably say himself that suits his game. That ruck to ruck speed, ruck to ruck zigzagging between the 15-meter lines to catch, to overload defenses on the short side. That's absolutely his game. The quick taps, he's got license to do that for Bristol. His suitability to how Bristol play is he's as in sync with Bristol as any other nine is with their team, probably more so. He absolutely suits that Bears way, to use how Pat Lam sort of talks about that philosophy, that intricate phase shape, which is why it's such a blow for Bristol that he's suffered this hamstring injury. Jack Van Portfleet, I've always felt, and I know other people potentially don't feel this way, I feel like he's really rounded as a scrum half. I think he's an underrated running threat. Scored a fantastic try for England A against Ireland. Tidy service. I think the high volume of kicking maybe lends itself to a couple more kicking errors per game than other scrum halves, but I think he's super tough in defence as well. Really good in that front line, sort of deceptively strong. And yeah, I'm a big fan of his. I think he is going to be in and around the England stuff as well. Would have been really, I think, cathartic for him to score that winning try in the second test against Argentina. I sort of bumped into him actually during his week when he was with the Lions on that weird sort of training cover sort of exhibition, and one of the reasons he would have been sent over on that is because he's a pretty, not really much ego about him. He's a hard worker who gets on with people really well. So yeah, there's a lot to like about Jack Van Portfleet, and he will certainly continue to earn England caps, I would imagine.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same about him. He just, you get kind of flashes of everything from him. You get the breaks, you get the kind of control, you get a very good passing game. You can see why a test coach would feel comfortable about having him as a bench option or coming in as a starter, because he does have that balance to his game. And it's not really Randall's fault that we just don't see him box kick as much as others. He can obviously do it. Like we've sort of heard that when we've spoken to him in England camps. But yeah, that was what separated them for me. At number 3, we both have Thomas Williams, the reigning Premiership player of the season, and certainly one of the best bits of business by a club in recent memory. I would love to know how this exercise would have played out if Williams didn't get injured on the Lions tour so early on, and if he went on to play a pivotal role in the Test series instead of Alex Mitchell or Jamison Gibson Park. It'd be really intriguing to see where he falls on this list. But even after an outstanding season for Gloucester and going on the Lions tour, I think being a top 3 scrum half in the Prem is pretty good. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Did he start? Had he started a game for the Lions? I'm trying to think whether, because he was certainly looking good.
It was in the Force game, wasn't it? It was in the Force game, and he did have a big role in setting up one try, I want to say, and then
had he started that game?
I will double check.
I'm trying to think whether I think he's a really, really good player, and he was certainly building up a lot of impetus on that Lions tour. I just sometimes wonder whether you see scrum halves, and and with this answer, I'm trying to sort of justify me not putting him in the top 2, I guess. But I think clearly sometimes with the nines, there can be such a big difference between starting a game and shaping the game with how you are with your passing and with your kicking versus coming on and just being that guy to raise the tempo. I think he was absolutely perfect for that role, and he was fulfilling that brilliantly. I couldn't see him pushing to start over Gibson Park. And clearly I've got Alex Mitchell above him, but I do think he was fantastic last season, and I do think it'll be pretty important for Gloucester to retain him, and if they don't retain him, it can be very important to see who they get in.
Yeah, it was not an easy decision to have him outside of the top 2, but I think, to answer your question, sorry, he was a sub against Argentina, and then he started the Force game. It was the Force game where he then went off in the act of scoring that try. Look, he's a brilliant player. I've got such high hopes for his potential with Ross Byrne at Gloucester, and I think it will come good, even if it hasn't quite fired yet. But yeah, listen, he's just an outstanding player and a great bit of business. Charlie, the top 2, we have the same players, but in a different order. So you have got Ben Spencer at number 1. I've got Ben Spencer at number 2. And we have Alex Mitchell in the other position. Talk to me about why you felt Ben Spencer was above Alex Mitchell in your ranking.
Oh, maybe just because of the control he's exuded within a title-winning side, and the context here is important. The Prem 1 to 10. I'm thinking about Premiership performances. I think I'd still start Alex Mitchell for England now that he's back available. But it was really heartening to see Ben Spencer get off the mark with wins for England, because that was becoming a really bizarre record, wasn't it? But yeah, he just is kicking, the control of his kicking game, how he can, how much of a foil he is for Finn Russell. You could see his authority in how Max Ajomo's come in at 10 and looked absolutely himself straight away. I just think he's an exceptional player at this level, and it will be really interesting with Lee Blackett to see how. I think he will certainly stick around the England setup. I think he'll play more, and I think he'll look more like himself. I think sometimes when he's been playing for England, you can almost see the cogs whirring, can't you? You can see the sort of, oh well, I'm in this area of the field. This is what our sort of game plan is, and I think he can. There are levels to that. He's 32, right? But I think he can sort of. I think he can sustain this level for a while. I think he's got. He can certainly be in the picture towards the next World Cup.
Can I just say to the Bath fans before you come at me with your pitchforks, like I think Spencer's unbelievable, and I've written about this many times. I don't think they win that title last season, for as good as Finn Russell is. I don't think they win it without Spencer, and that comes mainly down to how much he offers as a leader as well as the kicking game. There's just so much to like about him, and I think he's fantastic. The reason I had Mitchell above him is because I think Mitchell's box kicking game has come on so much in the last couple of years, and is such an elite skill set of his now, to go with the sniping runs, to go with the kind of vision that he has. You and I on Monday were WhatsApping each other about the Tom Pearson try, weren't we, and how much we enjoyed the kind of instinctiveness of that and the feel that Northampton have for how well that was created. Yeah, and also the other factor for me that kind of came into it with Mitchell was he's 28 now. There's still sort of room for him over the next 3-4 years to kick on even further, to kind of keep refining his tactical kicking game and his approach there, and continue that meshed with the kind of sniping runs and the attacking momentum that he generates, which England want to play with as well. They said it so often a couple of years ago that we almost stopped believing them, but they are actually showing now that they do kind of want to play a really attacking template, and we're starting to see that. And I just think Mitchell is key for that. So it was so hard to separate the two of them. They were almost 1A and 1B, but yeah, that's why I snuck Mitchell above Spencer.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I was just looking at what age Aaron Smith kind of would have been when he retired. So I think he would have been just turning 35 at the end of the last World Cup, or just after it. Ben Spencer actually 33. So you would have thought that, yeah, sort of over the next, and I'm fairly confident in saying Aaron Smith felt like he was improving until he did call it a day, and we've seen subsequently how difficult he's been to replace. I certainly think that with Jack Van Portfleet at 24, Alex Mitchell at 28, and Ben Spencer at 33, that trio, I think it will take a lot to sort of break those guys up, and they can see Borthwick, as we know, loves sort of horses for courses selections. I think he's got those. It's very likely to be 3 nines, isn't it, in a World Cup squad. I think it will take a very strong charge to sort of, or an injury to change that.
Yeah, and that was the cruelty with Jack Van Portfleet back in 2023, wasn't it? Like, he kind of seemed set to be the main guy, and then had that horror injury in the Wales warm up, was it? Which was just sickening.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's right. I think I was just thinking about who could break into that 3. I think someone like Rafi Quirk, who's a little bit of a wild card, who you would really want to kind of throw into throw into games as to break them up and be that sort of electric threat around the fringes. He can also be a weapon in defence, Rafi Quirk. But the landscape at nine's very interesting. Got Archie McParland, who people really like at Northampton Saints, Lucas Friday at Harlequins, very highly thought of, Charlie Bracken we mentioned earlier. So yeah, there's almost room. You almost feel there's room within the England setup for somebody to make a pitch, but at the same time, it feels quite settled too.
Yeah, put it this way: there are other position groups that we're more concerned about, shall we say, with England moving forward. Listen, Charlie, that was the scrum halves. I would love to know, listeners, viewers, what you would like us to rank next in terms of positions, and let us know, and we can certainly try and get a couple more in before we get into the weeds of the autumn test. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that. Charlie, let's have a little break, and then we're going to round off with Name That Player. Right, Charlie, last but not least on this week's episode, it's Name That Player. So last week's player, if I give a brief summary of their career, 2009 to 2019 for the Crusaders, 2019 to 2021 for Northampton, 2022 to 2023 for the Canes, stopped at Toulouse for a little bit in 2023, and then was also back at the Crusaders in 2024. 108 caps for the All Blacks. That player was Charlie.
It was Owen Franks. I feel like these top 14 stints are going to be either curveballs, or one person's curveball is another one sort of clicking and going, it's definitely that. And then there's another little stint on this one for this week, isn't there, Ben?
Well, listen, it's not a top 14 stint, but whenever I can throw in some curveballs, I'm always willing to do that. So this week's Name That Player is 2003 to 2009 for the Waratahs, 2009 to 2010 for Leicester, a little bit of a gap, and then 2013 for Leinster, and then also won 67 caps for the Wallabies between 2003 and 2009. Something for you all to just ponder for the week ahead. Charlie, that's us. We've done it, mate. We've ranked scrum halves, we've previewed the Prem, we've rounded up some news, and yeah, you're at Saracen Sale, did you say?
I am, Saturday evening. We'll rank anything to reiterate.
Okay, so next week I'll have your top 10 Saracens versus Sale games, and then we can see where this week's number sort of slots in. Oh, listen, Charlie, pleasure as always. Listeners, viewers, we'll see you next week. Please like, share, subscribe, share it among your friends. We'll talk to you soon.